One of the most unfortunate circumstances I've ever personally witnessed in my life that happened to a football player, and a star football player at that, is what happened to Dylan Moses. Over my many years of watching football, basketball, many sports out there, I've seen my fair share of players that were once at the top and they completely fall off. But most times, and I would say 99% of the time, and a great example of that is Johnny Manziel, most of the times these top-notch stars fall off, it's because they do it themselves and they sabotage their own career. However, this young man has a completely different story, and as a matter of fact, I'll take a step even farther. His story couldn't be any more different than most of these other players. What intrigues me even more about it, and it's the main reason I want to share this story with you guys, is nobody has talked about this. This guy was ranked as a 5-star recruit and the 13th best overall player in the 2017 class. Fast forward in time to today, which is 2022, he's not even playing football anymore. I think that's beyond crazy. I'm excited to get into this video. Hope you guys are excited as well. As always, we're on the road to 300K, so if you like football content and videos like this, go to there, hit that subscribe button. If you don't want to, that is cool too. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. Good old Dylan Moses. Now, obviously, first things first, most of you know I'm an Alabama fan, so I already know a lot of stuff about this guy. I've kept up with him ever since he was a freshman at Alabama, and it was clear as day to see his freshman year, he was a star. I don't want to bore you and go over all the high school stuff. It's rather simple. I'll show you right here. He was a 5-star recruit, ranked as the 13th best player in the class, and he was a linebacker. If you were to go on Madden or an old NCAA game like NCAA 14 or 13 and build your dream linebacker, it would look like Dylan Moses. Coming out of high school, he was already listed at roughly 6'3" and 225 pounds. That's not too bad. He was exactly what everybody was looking for in that new modern day linebacker. Back in the 1990s, you wanted one of those big and strong, hard-hitting linebackers, but nowadays, you gotta have linebackers that aren't just big and strong, but also are fast and can keep up with wide receivers and running backs. Putting two and two together, I think you know where I'm going with this. Dylan Moses did just that. He was explosive, quick, big, strong, almost anything you want to use, you could put it in there for Dylan Moses. Let me put it this way, and I think it sums it up the best. There wasn't too much that Dylan Moses couldn't do. You want a hard-hitting linebacker? He checks off the box. You need him to cover a tight end or wide receiver? He can do that. You need him to cover a running back? He can do that. He can do a little bit of everything. I wanted to get that out the way and explain it to you just so you can get an idea how good he was. For all those reasons I just told you, that's why he was listed and regarded as the 13th best overall player in the country. It goes without being said, every school in the country, they wanted him and they were recruiting him hard, but he winds up landing up at Alabama. He gets to Alabama in 2017, which is the year they beat Georgia in the championship, and he didn't play much because there was a lot of older guys ahead of him. He did play here and there, and he had a lot of meaningful minutes in the Georgia game in the championship. All in all, for that freshman year, he didn't play much, but when he did play, you was like, okay, this is Nick Saban's next great linebacker. In that freshman year, in 8 games played, he wound up having 30 tackles, which isn't bad, 5.5 for loss and 1.5 sacks, and 1 interception. Not too bad, not too bad. Fast forward in time to 2018, which was his second year, aka his sophomore year, he improved even more. This was a year where everybody was like, okay, this guy's a beast, and this is what we wanted to see. In 15 games played, he had 86 tackles, 10 of those being for loss and 3.5 sacks. Here's the only dilemma with this. It's hard to judge how good a linebacker was when I'm just reading off his stats to you. I've seen examples where a linebacker can have 60 tackles and he can be far superior than a linebacker who has 140 tackles. I think a good way to describe it, and this is how I always viewed it, Dylan Moses and any linebacker, the star linebacker of any team, they're like the leader or the captain of the defense. They're making sure that everybody else is doing their job, and there's a lot that goes into it that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. You're not going to see too many linebackers that have over 12 sacks a year or 5 interceptions. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. I wouldn't say that Dylan Moses was a monster. I think a monster was Reuben Foster for Alabama. That guy, he was just scary, but he was really solid. Whenever that second year wrapped up, I remember like it was yesterday. Everybody was talking about, okay, all he has to do is come back for his junior year, go off once again, and he's going to be a first-round pick, no doubt about it. I remember it so vividly, and this is why I feel so bad for him, because everybody saw and everybody knew he was going to be a first-round pick. Sadly and unfortunately, though, this is where our story takes a drastic, and I mean a very drastic turn. Heading into his junior year of 2019, which was the year he was supposed to break out even more, he wound up tearing his ACL just a couple of days before the season opener against Duke. Devastating. I don't know another word to use for it. You got a guy who was within 8 months of being a first-round pick and making millions of dollars, and yet his dream gets taken away from him just like that. Me personally, I tore my ACL not once but twice, so I know exactly what he went through. Most people don't understand it. They go, oh, ACL, not that big of a deal. He'll just have surgery and he can bounce back in 6 months. That is such naive thinking, and it actually goes to show you just how much surgery has advanced, because yeah, we do see it a lot where athletes, they can tear their ACL and they will be back in 8 months like nothing happened. But you have to understand that's not the same for every athlete, and everybody's body is different. For some athletes, yes, they may tear their ACL and they can come back in 8 months like nothing happened, but for a lot of athletes, that's not the case. Just because you tear your ACL and have surgery, it doesn't mean you're good as new, and from a person who has experienced myself, you'll more than likely never be the same. You may get up to 95% or 96%, but it's not the same, and if you've had ACL surgery, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Once you tear that ACL one time, you lose that bit of explosiveness. You're not as fast and quick, and you can't make those lateral movements like you once could. I think a great and prime example of this is Derrick Rose. I don't have to go over the Derrick Rose story. You know what happened. Ever since those injuries, never been the same. Has he still been a good NBA player? Yes, but he hasn't been that MVP Derrick Rose like we once saw. Getting back on topic with Mr. Dylan Moses, there's not all too much to say about his junior year. He tore his ACL, he couldn't play, and that's that. So fast forward in time to 2020, which was his senior year and the year he came back from his ACL surgery, he had high and heavy expectations. I even remember this myself as a Bama fan. I was naive to think that he was going to come back like nothing happened. I was like, man, Dylan Moses is coming back. He's going to be fine. He was a 5-star recruit. He's going to pick up right where he left off. Whew, and man, oh man, I couldn't have been any more wrong, and I hate to say this, I really do, but I was disappointed. And it's not so much that I'm disappointed in Dylan Moses, because I know he was giving it everything he had and everything he's got. It's more of I was just disappointed because I saw how good he was before. It was disappointing, and I'm not too sure if disappointing is the right word to use. It was more of hurtful to see him go out there, give it all he's got, but just know he's not the same athlete he once was. You could tell he was going 100%, but it almost felt like, and if you're a Bama fan, you know what I'm talking about, he was missing something. He wasn't as fast. He was missing tackles, and that wasn't like Dylan Moses, because that freshman and sophomore year, he didn't miss tackles. Once again, it hurts me to say this because Dylan Moses is a great and humble guy, but it was almost at times he felt like a liability on the field. His production wasn't there, and I'll show you the numbers right here. His stats, all of them decreased. He went from having 86 tackles as a sophomore to his senior year only having 76. As a sophomore, he had 10 tackles for loss. As a senior, he only had 6, and his sacks dropped from 3.5 to 1. The numbers do give you somewhat of an insight and perspective, but it doesn't do it any justice. He wasn't the same athlete, and he wasn't the same player, and in reality, he wasn't all too good or special. Here's where it gets even worse though, and more depressing than before, because Dylan Moses posted this on Instagram in 2020. From not knowing whether or not we'd have a season, fighting through pain every single game due to not being fully recovered from the knee injury I went through last year, to losing my grandmother to COVID-19, all of this has only made me stronger, and I'm happy I was able to be there in day out with my teammates no matter what I was going through. Man, I don't even care if you're not a sympathetic person. I'm not a sympathetic person. In my heart, it hurts for him. And I'm not trying to make this about me. I'm just trying to give you some perspective, and if you've had ACL surgery, once again, you can relate to this. Just because you quote-unquote recover, it doesn't mean you're actually fully recovered. This man, Dylan Moses, during his senior year of 2020, in that year where he wasn't all too hot and everybody ragged on him a lot, he was fighting through pain just to be out there. Look, I get it. A lot of Bama fans, they were hating on him during that 2020 senior season. And yes, I'll admit it. He wasn't all too hot, but there's one thing you can't take away from him, and that's his passion for the game. If you don't respect Dylan Moses, I just can't respect you. He actually also stated this, and I didn't even know it at the time, that he almost quit football, and the only reason he even continued to play was because of his family. That's absolutely crazy to me, and that just goes to show you football, it's not just physical, but it's also mental. He also added this, and it's kind of a long quote, and I don't like reading long quotes because I know you guys don't like hearing them, but this one is vital to our story. This quote I'm about to read to you is how he told everybody where, yeah, in the first game of the year, he felt 100%, but after that, that's when the pain came in. Dylan Moses stated, just as far as going through the pain and stuff throughout the year, the first time I felt like 100% myself was the very first game of the season against Missouri. After that, just all throughout the season, it was just constantly like pain and all that. But like I said, it was something I had to persevere through. I never had to go through a whole season feeling like that. It was new for me, but at the same time, it was nothing I couldn't play through. And he also added this, and this is the last and final quote I'm going to read. Like I said, I'm really tough when it comes to dealing with a lot of pain and all that, but at the end of the day, I just want to be there for my teammates, make a difference, and be able to make the calls for them. Clap it up, man. Like I said, if you don't respect Dylan Moses after watching this video, I don't know what to tell you. This man played through pain every single game just to be there for his teammates and be there for the University of Alabama. Nothing but respect for this man, and if some of y'all want to try to say that I'm hating on him by saying that senior year he wasn't as productive or wasn't as good. That's not even coming from me. Well, it is coming from me, my bad. But that's just what everybody even saw and witnessed. And I'm going to show you right here, everybody said it. It's not hating on him, it's just the facts. Now, after that 2020 year, he technically could have came back to Alabama. And now that I think about it, I don't know why he didn't, but that's besides the point. To make a long story short, he entered the NFL draft. According to all the mock drafts, he was predicted to be a mid-round pick around 3rd or 4th round to a late round pick, which is like the 6th or 7th round. But as we all know, if you keep up with the NFL draft, and we saw the same thing happen to the Georgia star linebacker Nakobe Dean, if you have injury concerns, you're going to fall in the draft. Nakobe Dean for Georgia was supposed to be a 1st round pick, and he fell all the way down to the 3rd round because of concerns with injuries. So if people were concerned with Nakobe Dean, you already know that they were going to be 2 times more concerned with Dylan Moses, and that's exactly what happened. A lot of these teams were concerned with his ACL and meniscus injury, and it was actually stated that 6 teams just took him off of their board completely because of medical stuff. It was stated they couldn't get a legit read on him medically, so they just took him off the board, which is unfair if you had to ask me. He wound up going undrafted, and I don't want to say it shocked me, but I would say it definitely shocked Nick Saban, because check out what he had to say about it. It had nothing to do with what kind of football player he is. It was based on medical grades by the teams, which frankly was a little surprising to me. Okay, so there we have it right there. Even Nick Saban thought medically he was okay. But we know how this goes. Just because Saban and Alabama, they clear him. Some of these NFL staffs, they may not clear him, and I don't want to dive into all that. It's a big mess. For example, with Nakobe Dean for Georgia this year, there wasn't even any medical bad stuff about him, and then the NFL people were saying, oh yeah, his medical stuff, it was bad, and blah, 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 you know how it goes. After he went undrafted, he got picked up by the Jacksonville Jaguars, and there's not too much to say. He didn't even play for him. He was on their practice squad, and recently on April 11th in 2022, he got released or cut. One of the main reasons he didn't even play for the Jaguars is because he spent, I think it was almost like the entire season on the non-football injury list. According to the reports, and I'm just going to read it off to you right here, he was set to be healthy enough to begin practice this offseason for the Jaguars, but it now appears the team will look to fill its need for linebackers elsewhere. Here's where things get slightly more interesting though, because if you go to his Instagram, and it's private, but according to his Instagram, he is partnering with a company that goes by the name of SideGen. What is SideGen, you may ask? Well, it's a company that specializes in stem cell research and regenerative medicine. To dumb that down and to put it into English, it's basically stem cell therapy. If you've ever had an injury and had to go to rehab, you should be familiar with that. According to Dylan Moses, he's been using a few of their products, and he says, quote unquote, he feels better than before. Now, as an average Joe like myself who tore my ACL playing high school sports, and I no longer am pursuing a, what would you call it, a career in the NFL or NBA or whatever, I don't need to do that stuff because I'm not trying to go to the NBA or NFL. I don't care about it. I don't care if my ACLs go back to where they once were. But for Dylan Moses, and I find this interesting, because if he didn't care about it, I feel like he wouldn't be doing all this stem cell therapy. So maybe, and just maybe, he is doing this, so potentially he could try to make a comeback. I don't know. If I had to take a wild guess, I'm going to assume that he's really not trying to pursue a football career. It's more so of he's just wanting to be healthy in his knees. Maybe he is trying to pursue a comeback. I don't know. And even if he does get healthy, I don't think there's many teams I would want him. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I'm wishing this man the best of luck. One of those rare stories where he didn't do drugs, he didn't sabotage his own career himself. It was just injuries. And these are always the saddest stories to me because, for example, with Johnny Manziel, if you ruin your own career, I don't feel bad for you. Maybe you feel bad for Johnny Manziel, but I don't. But for a guy like this, injuries just belittled his career. You gotta feel bad for him, right? I believe everything happens for a reason, though. There's a purpose behind everything, and I hope Dylan Moses, he finds a career in something else. He's gonna be just fine. He's got his head on straight. I'm definitely not worried about him. I am very curious. Let me know your thoughts on this down below. But